and we'll go from there. Ace. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode. I have got Mr. Embodiment himself, Mark Walsh, with me. Good afternoon, Mark. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello, mate. Nice to see you.
So maybe you can start us off, because briefly before I let you introduce yourself more formally, even before what we've just been discussing and me kind of getting to know you a little bit through our mutual friend Jamie Abrahams, I have heard about you from the Brighton scene for quite a few years now, and yeah, I've been following you via YouTube and stuff for many years, and maybe I can't believe it's been taking me this long to chat to you, really, but maybe you can just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're Mr. Embodiment and what that maybe really means.
Yeah, by the Brighton scene, you mean Grinder, right?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, Mr. Embodiment is just a sort of silly thing people started saying when I was doing interviews. They're like, "Oh, you're Mr. Embodiment," because that I've become associated with that word quite strongly. So just kind of picked it up from there. So I'm interested in all the body-mind arts and how they all fit together. So I know you do yoga, movement work, breath work. You can add to that martial arts, body therapy, body work, like hands-on, improv, comedy and theatre even, like Western somatics practices. You know, what all these things have in common, they're all about the body, but the body as subject, not object. So the body as part of who we are. So you could look at the body as a sort of piece of meat, as a thing, or you could say, okay, this is part of us. This is part of us, and it can be developed, I guess is the other thing. So yes, mindfulness, body awareness, but a bit more than that. What are we embodying and what do we want to embody? That's primarily what I'm interested in. I guess my day job is training coaches. You know, I train coaches in that. Trained a lot of yoga teachers, a lot of business people. Last year I was in Ukraine a couple of times, so doing trauma-related work. So, you know, I've worked with kids in the past. I've worked with all sorts of populations, but always with this embodiment area.
Sort of finding, you know, I guess, as you say, that through trauma or whatever else, but through the body, and actually being able to kind of see, feel, experience that thing a bit more fully, I guess. I definitely wanted to touch on the Ukraine thing, because I thought that was amazing what you were doing out there. I kind of have a slight experience of doing some embodiment. I mean, when I had Jamie on, we kind of discussed briefly, and it was kind of brought up the fact of, like, just because you do yoga doesn't necessarily mean you're embodied. And you know, from my perspective of my background, I look at me when I was a kid at school and stuff, and I was always the class clown. I was always like the joker and whatever else. And when it came to doing like some embodiment and, you know, doing a really big open,
making space pose, probably
making space pose, it's like a really
classics. Good American classic there. Jamie's great.
And as soon as I did it, though, I obviously couldn't take it seriously.
So you made a joke, right?
So I made it, so, you know, thrust my groin forward and kind of made probably some kind of slightly inappropriate penis joke. But yeah, and it's kind of, it suddenly makes you realize how, I don't know, you kind of think like I'm a fairly cocky, confident young man and whatever else, but actually as soon as maybe you just stand in front of a room of, obviously it was all women because I'm the only man who ever does most of the courses I do, with, you know, your arms open in this open pose, how vulnerable maybe you feel, and actually that's quite an opening thing for something.
For sure. I mean, you could do yoga as exercise. There's nothing wrong with that. You could do yoga for relaxation. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. I do that myself. You know, I do the gym for exercise. I do, you know, just mindful hatha and yoga just for relaxation. But you can also be using any physical practice really as an embodiment practice. So that reveals patterns. I heard some of the interview you did with Jamie, and you sort of said, hey, it's like being naked, not literally, in the sense of being vulnerable and being seen, being, you know, one thing we do is expose patterns. And those patterns they're many things. They're cultural. You know, we're British blokes, right? So we weren't taught to express our emotions. You know, we weren't, it's just not where I come from. I don't think you either, mate.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like, you know, Jamie's American, so she might be more comfortable with certain things and less comfortable with others, actually. This cultural background, it's to do with our practices, our personalities. So all these things in, you know, trauma, you can think, for example, of almost any embodiment as a safety strategy. And by strategy, I don't mean conscious. So Humor could be one. There's someone else who cries every time they feel uncomfortable. There's someone else who gets intellectual and clever. There's
Yeah.
someone else who gets macho and aggressive. You know, these are all ways to stay safe or to feel safe, to reestablish a feeling of safety. You know, like in this case, because you're like, well, this is a bit exposing. This might be a bit much. And you crack a joke, and you know, it's worse things you could be doing. And, you know, it's pretty cultural as well, isn't it? It's not, you wouldn't be the first British bloke, I'm sure, that's ever done
No,
that.
I actually thought I was like just going through a few of your clips today to you know, prepare a little bit, and one of the ones that really jumped out at me was like how to talk to a man, or how to like work with a man or something. And that's one of the things that, like you just said, it's one of the things that jumped out for me was, you know, they might not want to actually talk. That, you know, talking through their feelings might not actually be a legitimate way for them to work through something.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked with business guys, and this is some women as well, of course, and some
Yeah,
cops
yeah.
as well, but, you know, particularly, that's like, I don't know, my team worked with soldiers in Ukraine, for example, the team out there on the ground in Ukraine. And, you know, if they came in and said, hey, let's all talk about their feelings, they're just like, how about you fuck off?
Absolutely.
Imagine that in Ukrainian.
Yeah.
Like, there's just no way. But if they say, well, here's some practical tools, and here's some information, and here's something you might want to know about, and here's how this might affect your family if you don't deal with it, and here's a couple of exercises you can getting on with, you know, here's something you can get better at, here's something practical. People are pretty open. Like the
Yeah.
girls in Ukraine, they're 25-year-old psychology graduates mostly, and they're mostly female because the guys are all off fighting. And they don't have any problems. Like they go and talk to 100, 200 soldiers. They love it, by the way. They go and talk to 100 macho guys, and you know, I taught them how to sort of do it properly, how to do it in a way which is accessible, and
Yeah.
you know, how to present it so it's not going to get rejected. And they have very few problems.
I mean, that's one of the things that for me, it's kind of, I kind of feel like, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. But for me, it, like these days, all I see is people talking about, like, you know, talk through your feelings, like journal and whatever else. And like for me, those are things which just don't sit with me, if that makes sense. And it kind of,
different things for different people, right?
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying it's bad to talk about your
No,
feelings.
no.
It can be great. You know, I go to therapists sometimes and talk about stuff that's good, or I go to 12-step meetings and talk about things. It can be really
Yeah.
good. But sometimes I just go for a walk in nature. Some people
Yeah.
like to play with their dog. They
That's
find that
me.
regulating, right? Like they're
Yeah.
nervous. What you're really looking for is co-regulation. And you
Mhm.
can get co-regulation, you know, nervous system soothing, right? Like, you know, like you were a bit stressed at the beginning, it's cool. So I think you had some tech problem.
Yeah.
And it's like now you're kind of chilling out, you're relaxing into it. You're like, you know, having a nice conversation. Like, oh, this guy seems all right. We've got a couple of friends in common. Like that co-regulation can come through talking about feelings, but it can come through movement. It can come through nature. It can come through spirituality, and different things work for different people. And you can't force everyone into this sort of Northern Californian kind of therapy.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, exactly what you said there. For me, and I know I've got like clients myself who, for them, it's like get outdoors in nature, climb some trees, like jump around. And, you know, that's as kind of, you know, or, you know, there's a lot of people wild swimming these days, isn't there? Kind of getting in the season.
Ben Medder in London, Rafe Kelly in the States.
Yeah,
People
yeah,
whose
yeah.
whole careers built on taking people out into the woods and the parks. You know, it's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we kind of came on, we briefly, I brought up the idea of like psychology, because to me, this kind of comes into psychological side of things. And I know that you've previously, so we can tie these in really, but you've kind of previously, for your own bits and pieces, chatted to Gabor Mate, and you put a post a little while ago, which it was quite an interesting take on it, of like Gabor Mate versus Jordan Peterson, but like the psychology of like embodiment and how, you know, again, horses for courses, different people, different things, blah, blah, blah. But like, for one, how much do you like maybe your own experience, your own background, whatever else, like psychological work seems to be a big, like understanding how people are going to respond, react, their mental side to the embodiment practices seems to be a big part of like how I see embodiment working, I guess, because people definitely, when we did that course, Jamie, there was girls opening up and then just bursting into tears.
Yeah. You were bursting into laughter, they were bursting into tears, right? But they're both coping. So all right, so embodiment work can be thought of as where body meets psychology, right? So like that's so they're inseparable in that sense. And there is a long tradition in psychology of body psychology that actually came from various students of Jung and Freud. It goes back a while. And it's always been part of Asian traditions. Like if you talk to a Japanese person about doing Aikido or Kendo, they're not really interested in fighting or hitting you with a stick. They're interested in the formation of character.
Okay.
Actually used, so Budo is a way to develop oneself, and obviously a yoga would be another way to develop oneself, right?
Yeah.
So it's a very Asian idea, very normal in Asia. You know, every Asian kid does judo, kendo, something like that in Japan. You know, it's totally normal.
Yeah.
We used to have that idea in the West, actually. So, as you know, Britain invented all the world's decent sports. And they were
all the real sports.
All the real sports. Some of them were sort of twisted by America later on, but all the real sports were invented in the UK: football, rugby, cricket, etc. And they were all actually character development activities. So if you think of how sports were played, the idea was to develop the person. And we still kind of have that idea. You know, the PE teacher making the kids run around the field in the rain still kind of has that idea, but we haven't really sort of got it in the sophisticated frame the yogis and the martial arts teachers in Asia have. That idea is still, you know, the cold showers at Gordon Stones, or the rugby is a leadership academy. Essentially, it's a school for the privileged elite. Cambridge was where football was invented. You know, soccer, then it Cambridge University. So these aren't accidents. This was the character formation arts of the Western world. And that was, you know, during, say, Victorian times, that was completely accepted, like in Napoleonic times, for example. But we've kind of lost that tradition in our sports, but we're sort of rediscovering it through the East. And also, I see it rediscovered in other places. Like I was at a climbing wall with my wife last night. We went bouldering. Big climbing wall, and great vibe. Nice people, nice culture. We're just getting into it. Fun thing to do, but you know, people are working with courage and bravery and communication. But they're working with character traits. They're not just like, why get up a wall just to get down it again? It's completely pointless. Right? But from the point of view of developing yourself and not just physically but psychologically, climbing is great for that. It's not just the habit.
That's actually really fascinating when you say that, because you do just think like, I mean, I guess it is like with anything, but like, why just climb up a wall? But actually, when you suddenly think of, especially if you're someone who, I don't know, bouldering walls are never that high, I guess, but you know, it's still, you know, 25 feet or something up a wall with no ropes and stuff, and it does actually, bring in that psychological side of development and stuff quite a bit. Yeah, that's pretty interesting.
I mean, anything is, right? Like, what's the game of football? You're just kicking a bit of lever around a field. It's completely pointless unless it's for something. I mean, the same for yoga. I did yoga for years, and you could do it just for physical health, and that's fine. You know, the people that need to mobilize, and you know, that's great, right? It's good to mobilize the body and stay healthy. You know, be flexible. But I saw this joke on embodied yoga that Jamie also did. She studied with me and then co-taught with me that, you know, if you can pick up your phone from the floor, your hamstrings are long enough. Right? Like if you get down the floor with your kids, if you can, you know, just help move the sofa in behind me. I'm strong enough. Like that is the biggest strength task of my month, is helping guy move that sofa in, right? I don't need to be strong. You know, basic strength, basic flexibility, basic aerobic fitness, which in the Western world is not a given, right? But beyond that, what are we doing? Like bending, getting long hamstrings. Why? What's the point? Like standing on one leg. Why?
Contorting into weird shapes.
Hey, being a pretzel, who gives a shit? But there's no points for that, you know? Now, if you're doing a handstand in order to develop certain qualities, now we have a point, right? But if you're just doing it, I don't know, to put on Instagram to show people, like, it's not really good enough reason for me anyway. It doesn't.
No, I agree.
I often used to start embodied yoga principles sessions by saying, which was the system of using embodiment in yoga. Sometimes we call it embodied toolkit now for the coaches. I used to say, what are your values? What do you care about? And people would tell me their values. I'd say, right, health, let's just put that aside. That's the one thing I don't really cover, you know?
Standard.
And then they tell me politics, love, money. You know, they tell me what they cared about. And I'd say, great, how does your tree pose help with that? And then there's the silence, right? But whereas, like, if someone's taking an embodied perspective, which you could add to any normal yoga practice, you would have an answer for that.
Okay, and I think that's what, when obviously when I used, now you said in yoga body, what was it?
Yoga principles,
EYP, yeah. That was what, yeah, that was when I was following you on Instagram, on YouTube many years ago. And obviously when Jamie came down, I think that was what that course was. And that's what I found so interesting about taking a yoga pose like that you do every day. Do you know what I mean? Like a warrior or whatever else. And actually suddenly having the perspective of like, are you just standing here doing a warrior pose? If so, why? Like, you know, from my perspective, I kind of, Warrior 2, I kind of feel is one of the more pointless yoga poses anyway.
From a physical point of view.
From a physical point of view.
I mean, it's not good for your quads particularly, is it? It's not a great stretch particularly.
No, it's
like if I want to build my quads, I'll do squats, right? Or I'll do a leg press.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, twos for 17 minutes.
Right. Like, what's the point? But from the point of view of developing the character and the quality of a warrior, now that might be very useful in your life.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Not physically fighting, perhaps in Ukraine, but the quality of being able to say no, the quality of being fierce. You know, Jamie's embodies that very well. Yeah, that focus, that, you know, there's a reason it's called warrior pose and not fluffy kitten pose. You know, like the person that gave it that name, whenever that was in India, 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years ago, whenever, right, maybe we're not so sure, but whenever it was, they weren't mental. You know, they looked at it and went, how do I feel when I do this? And then we can look at the physiological side and go, oh, maybe we're increasing our testosterone levels, and maybe this is to repair your personal space. And there's all sorts of scientific reasons why we might be enhanced, actually changing our chemistry, you know, power pose, basically, that might be in there too. But it's also it's archetypally mapped. You could show that pose to anyone in any culture in the world in the same way as you can show a good piece of art to anyone in the world, or even a good piece of advertising. Yeah. And they look at that pose or that piece of art and they won't say, oh, this woman is wimp. They'll say, wow, she's badass.
Strong.
This warrior. You know, they'll get it. Even if they might call it badass pose instead of warrior pose, right? But they get the essence of it.
Yeah. That's super interesting. And I think that's, you know, I have definitely taken that more into myself, my own practice. Maybe a little bit when I teach, but, you know, I've never obviously trained with you or anything, but
you could just do it a little bit though, right? You're welcome.
That's the thing.
I would say like the print. That's why we call it principles. You could just say, "Hey, does this pose feel familiar?"
Yeah.
And if so, because the first time I did warrior, I was like, "Hell yeah!" Someone else, because that's just my disposition. But someone else might have gone, "Oh, I hate this." You know, I used to see someone do it every day, and I used to go to this Aikido class, the Brighton Buddhist Center, every Monday for 10 years. And there was one girl who every Monday shrunk and put the arms in instead of extending the arms, and the teacher would correct her. So she wasn't stupid. Her eyes worked. So what was going on? Well, her habitual personality was reasserting itself. She found it challenging on an emotional level, not on a physical level. There's nothing wrong with her anterior deltoid.
She can hold her arms out.
She hold her arm out, it's fine. But emotionally, that didn't feel right. It didn't feel habitual. It didn't feel okay to her. So it didn't matter how many times the teacher told her not to do it. She'd always do it. And she never noticed that from the point of view of like, hey, what is this telling me about myself? Actually, maybe I should do this one twice as much as child's pose.
Yeah. And then, so from like in your, say, as an embodiment coach, whatever, and, you know, that would be something that you maybe highlight to someone and say, have you even noticed? Because that's the sort of thing that nobody does notice. But do you find that once people do notice, then that's actually something, you know, if you kind of say, you're kind of almost hiding from there, you know, actually, how is this affecting your, you know, how does this work with your personality and stuff? And is that something that does change?
Yeah, so there's two things. We've got awareness and choice, right? So all embodiment work's really about awareness and choice. State you can just feel. Like you were probably aware you were a little stressed at the beginning of the call, and probably very easy if you'd be aware you're less stressed now, right? You can just feel that if you practice mindfulness. Trait, you can't just feel. It has to be exposed. So like when you did this, it exposed something. When she did the warrior pose, I'm talking about exposed something, right? Something was revealed. It's like trying on someone else's shoes and just going, this don't feel right, you know, or like you smell someone else's poo and you're like, it's not nice, where's your own? It's fine. So you can reveal that, but you can't just be mindful of it. You need a way of revealing it. So awareness is number one. Just that is great because it lets you know you've got a pattern, because otherwise you just think, well, this problem's the pose, silly pose, you know. So awareness is great, but then how do we change ourselves? Well, we can change our state in various ways, like, you know, breath work, great one that you do, I know, movement, but you can't always do that. So we do things like micro poses. So you can do a micro warrior pose. You know, you can just sit in a slightly more warrior-like way. You can walk in a slightly more warrior-like. You can stand in a meeting or, sit in a meeting in a warrior-like way without looking like a yogi who's just been on a course. You'll just look assertive. But once you've got that map, you can micropose it. You can just do the essence of it. You can almost think it's almost enough after a while. And then, of course, you can practice it.
Yeah.
Changing states is great, but you have to focus. It takes work.
Okay.
Changing traits. Now, if she's consciously practicing that warrior pose with that intention in that way and confronting that emotional discomfort rather than, physical discomfort, that's what we're trying to do in EYP. We're trying to make people emotionally challenged. Essentially, it's never going to be very popular because it's not pleasant. It's not pleasant
because no one wants to do it. Really,
not really. It's useful, but it's not a holiday. Because yoga for most people is a holiday. It's for me on a Wednesday night. It's a holiday. I just go to chill,
Yeah. Go and sit in a child's pose and whatever else. Amazing. So I guess with that then, and I kind of want to just go back to that point where because I enjoyed that post of like the mother and the father of psychology of of Canada.
Mum and dad. Yes, that was controversial, that one, but
I bet it was.
Get something from it. Yeah.
But I guess you don't seem to be the sort of person who controversy. You don't, again, you kind of got that warrior kind of more side of things.
Sure. You're not going to be loved by everyone, are you? The old saying, you're not pizza, not everyone loves you. And even some wankers gluten-free anyway, so not even pizza loved by everyone. So it's no, I mean, if you want to be a leader, you can't be liked by everyone. You can't have an original opinion if you want to be liked by everyone. It holds back a lot of people, more women than men, more Brits than Americans. We're pretty conflict averse as a culture.
Yeah.
Something I learned from the Slavic people working a lot in Russia, Croatia, Ukraine.
Just don't give a shit.
They don't give a shit. They'll just tell you. Someone stood up in one of my workshops once in Moscow and just went, "You are wrong." And I was like, thanks, appreciate that. Thanks for your opinion,
Because the Poles are definitely like that, aren't they? The Poles don't.
They're direct. They don't mess around. That's why I married a Ukrainian. It's just like I like that. It suits me. Yeah. Israel, I've worked a lot as well. They're pretty direct. I was on a course with this great Israeli teacher, Emog, this last weekend. He was teaching. I was a student. We had this big argument, and all the Brits were running out in tears and getting upset. And me and him were fine. We went for lunch 10 minutes later.
But it's just like that thing of like.
Yeah,
it's just what it is.
Big deal. Anyway, so that's a cultural thing. But that post, So Gabor, I've done a couple of interviews with. I've met, not in person, but online a few times. We do conferences and events. I've interviewed. Been lucky actually. I've met online most of the major big figures in the trauma world. Peterson, I've never met, but I've had some connection with people that know him, and his work's been interesting to me for some years. And what I realized is they were both sort of saying half the truth. And I think I don't know how you feel about this, mate, but I'm a bit tired of the culture wars. I'm a bit tired of the divisiveness and
I hate it.
I hate it. And everyone's part right. Because if Peterson wasn't part right, he wouldn't be so popular. He's not just an idiot.
No.
And if Gabor wasn't part right, he wouldn't be so popular. And he's not an idiot either. They're both smart men. And they essentially represent two poles of what we could call liberal and conservative values, not as in the political parties, but in the sort of wider sense that why does anyone do anything? What's the cause of suffering would be the sort of philosophical way to describe it. And always liberal and conservative causes, and we tend to lean towards one or the other. So Gabor Mata says, hey, it's not your fault, it's society.
Yeah.
And he's right, because society's fucked. Society's really responsible for it. We're not going to yoga our way out of pollution and inequality and lack of community. I don't care how good your yoga is. Society's got problems. We've got things to be grateful for in society. So Peterson says, hey, be grateful. We do not live in Ukraine. I was looking at my body armor hanging up in the bedroom going, won't be needing that today in rural, west of England, heading out the door. I kind of laughed when I saw it. I was like,
I bet.
Where I live is super chill.
It's pretty good.
What's that hanging
it's
up
pretty good.
I said to my wife, put that one at the back. We don't need that one out the front. So we're really lucky to live here. And Peterson says, hey, clean your room. Take responsibility. But buck up, kiddo. And boys have lapped that up because boys have been raised by women around the world in modern education systems, female dominated. And culture's also turned towards the feminine lately. And it's like, mother will protect you, mother will look after you. We have to keep everyone safe. We can't. Like little boys are gone, where's dad? And their dad's
Yeah.
not dad because their dad's a mess of estrogen and doesn't have any testosterone 9 times out of 10. And they look at this professor who's clever and tough and he says, clean your room. And you think the little boys would go, like 14-year-old boys would go, oh no, I don't want to clean my room. But actually they go, oh, thanks, dad.
Yeah.
Because he gives them that strict no nonsense. So, they're both right.
Yeah.
And the fact that they argue with each other, or Gabble was saying that Peterson was this and that and name calling. And I was like, nah, that's not cool, man.
No.
Like, you're both great men, both have interesting things to say.
Well, I found that because I've only read When the Body Says No of Gabor, and I've listened to numerous, the ones with you and like other bits and pieces of, podcasts and stuff. And it kind of feel like, it's almost, they're both of a time to a certain degree. Because at the moment, like trauma seems to be a key word.
Trending. It's fashionable.
It's huge trending. And, I've
so
got...
cool right now. So hot right now.
So hot right now. Like I'm a nurse, and I've got like mental health friends. I've got mental health nurses who are friends.
Right.
And and they say the same thing. It's like fucking like not everything is like you can't just use the word trauma for every single like.
Particularly, my Ukrainian team laugh when I tell them what the average American or Canadian thinks is trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, we just laugh about it. We just think it's first world problems. It's just.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the ironic thing of first world problems, actually, especially as I guess you're lucky enough to have been out there to Ukraine and spent time, and you suddenly get to see quite how first world problem so much of it is.
It's overshoot, right? It's good because we used to say like stiff upper lip. Like my granddad used to wake up screaming every night from World War II PTSD. He was in a bomber, and he used to wake up screaming till the day he died. And he'd be like, "I'm fine." I'm like, even as a kid, I was like, "You don't look fine, mate. You look like you wake up fine. Cold sweat, screaming. I'm gonna hit you next door." Like my dad was an alcoholic, so he was like, "I'm fine." Sometimes it's good that we say, "Hey, maybe we're not fine." Men need to say that. Men's suicide rates, one of our many male privileges is killing ourselves at rate.
Yeah, we're really
going for that privilege right now.
Was that joke? I think you stole the joke. I think you stole the joke, but I fucking cracked me up when you said because we're really good at doing DIY.
We are good at. I did take that one from someone else. Yeah, we're good at DIY. Just better at getting the job done, joking aside, like, I've had suicides in my family. It's a big thing. And I go, you know what? It's good that we're saying, hey, maybe we're not okay. Mental health awareness is great. But equally, the overshoot on that, I was at a course a couple of months back and we went around the circle and people was in London and people just introduced themselves with their mental disorders. They were like, I have autism and PTSD. I have this and that. And I was like, just tell me your name, mate. Introduce. I don't need to know this up front. Sometimes it's useful to say, hey, like I'm ADHD, I'm neuroatypical, so that's why I look like a squirrel. I sometimes tell people I have ADHD, but I'm not going to introduce myself. Like, it hasn't been relevant in this interview, right? We've been going for half an hour. I didn't need to tell you. So it's like, unless it's relevant, I don't tell people. And some of this overshoot is a little funny, and hopefully it will sort of settle down a bit.
I think it's always the way, though. I guess it's always like pendulum swinging one way to the other, and I guess it's I don't know. It's I don't know. There's such a big pendulum swing from the.
Say what you're thinking.
Well, we've kind of gone from like we're getting into the toxic masculinity sides of things and the woke world of like we
doesn't exist in Ukraine. I tell you, when there's Russians trying to kill you, but
be as fucking masculine as you can.
So then my Ukrainian women will say things like, I say my women, my team, right? They're wonderful people, like Jen, you and Kate. I spoke to today. Happy birthday, Kate. They're like, we love our men. Our men are strong and brave and noble. We love our men. And I'm like, oh my God, it's nice to hear that.
Yeah.
Our men are toxic and they're awful. And jokes aside, my team hears stories of rape every day. So we are fully aware of the worst things men can do to women, fully aware.
Yeah.
Right? That's a daily thing we hear about. And still, they're like, men are fantastic. We love our men. And these are not stupid, weak women. These are kick-ass women with PhDs in psychology.
Yeah. Yeah. But I guess it's kind of, social media is a funny old game, isn't it? But when you get kind of you know, you've kind of swung so far back. You know, you've kind of got Peterson, and then you've kind of got Andrew Tate, who's kind
even
of
more, right?
whether
He's the
whether
shadow
he's
of
playing
masculinity.
whether he's playing a character like he says, I don't know, but like, you know, it's just kind of, yeah, that big pendulum swing in it of just kind of someone's going to look for the thing they're missing, I guess, and that's where
I mean, I've been
trying
trying
to,
to figure this out. Sorry, off to you.
no, I was just going to say, you know, if someone's trying to figure out what they're missing and they're not getting it from a more like liberal kind of touchy feely, like, you'll be fine, just do this, then they're going to find someone who says, just go out and work your ass off and go
Andrew
do martial
Tate,
arts.
if you're 10 or 12 years old, Andrew Tate's what you think masculinity is.
Yes. Yeah.
Like sports cars, fighting,
Bugattis.
around him. Yeah, Bugatti in it. Like he's like, I don't know what the guy's real opinions is. I actually met a kickboxing guy who said he was a quite nice guy in real life. I don't know that the legalities of his ins and outs. Obviously, trafficking people, that's awful, you know. And in terms of what I'm interested in is not who he actually is, because I don't know him.
Yeah.
Right. What I'm interested in is the symbolism.
Yeah.
For me, he's the sort of shadow side of the archetypal masculine, unexamined. It's like an immature version of the masculine, which would appeal to a 12-year-old.
Yeah.
And some of this is just the technology. So if you're saying outrageous things and you have a beautiful car or a beautiful, you know, models by you, it's a way of garnering attention in an attention deficit culture. I mean, the world's very divided, but actually it's way better in real life than online. Like most people are all right.
Yeah.
For most people, and they're fine.
Yeah.
Like most people are a bit liberal, a bit conservative, a bit of both, maybe, like I am, but they're all right. And then you go online and it's just a shitstorm. And
everyone fucking hates
our embodiment and empathy online. It's partly the sort of nature of the online. It's partly the platforms that want to absolutely game us for our attention. You know, it's a mixture of factors. But my worry is it's starting to happen in life now. The sort of cancel culture starting. I had an instance of this this week actually. I was asked not to come back to a local cafe because I was overheard speaking, and obviously it expressed something that wasn't allowed. I mean, it wasn't anything outrageous, I don't think, but it was the kind of conversation we're having now, basically.
Yeah.
And with a friend of mine, a female friend actually, and I was asked not to come back to the cafe, and I thought, oh my god, I've been cancelled. You know, I've been cancelled from this cafe. I'm like, okay, you know, after they accepted my money for an overpriced lunch, weirdly. But,
weirdly,
very strange. They didn't just not accept my money. But yeah, like, I go, oh god, is this spilling out into real life? And I do worry as governments start to develop policies around this kind of thing. And you know, I'm an embodiment teacher, so I just try and stay focused on what I do and teach embodiment. And you know, I train coaches and I train business people, and I try and kind of give people some skills that might be useful. At the end of the day, the rest is just conversation.
Have you found that, like, with the embodiment side of thing and the coaching, like, there's obviously you've said like your team's using it with soldiers and all sorts out in Ukraine, and you know, I guess it's how you do it, but I would imagine, like, for me, it's the sort of work that in many ways, like, would be really fucking helpful for kids to have an understanding of. But I imagine also at the same time trying to do it in schools, because I've done some, you know, some breath work and some like yoga-y type stuff in schools, and you know, for one, I find kids have to trust you, and going in for like 2.5 hour session, they don't trust you at all. So like, I don't know who the hell you are. But is that like that must be a tricky one to try to negotiate that?
Kids aren't the hardest to work with. I mean, schools can be difficult to work with. The kids themselves aren't an issue. I haven't worked with a lot of schools in the UK for a while. I used to do a lot of outdoor education work with schools.
Okay.
And, you know, that's a great medium for personal growth as well. The Outward Bound, the PGL, that kind of thing. And, you know, some listeners might not have this in their country, but it's part of what we call the national curriculum in the UK. So I think outdoor education is a good modality. And as you say, it's like any group. You've got to have a relationship or build relationship. You've got to trust. You've got to put it in a language they understand. You've got to sell it to them. You've got to motivate, even if they've been told to be there, whether they've been sent by HR or sent by Mrs. Smith, you know, the teacher. You've got to sell it to them. You've got to motivate them with reasons to do it.
Yeah.
You've got to give them something practical they can use and prove that it works. I mean, like, you know, with kids, I've worked through martial arts, I've worked through games. You know, it's perfectly feasible. Several of my students work with kids. So yeah, other than the logistical hassles of, you know, underfunded, stressed schools, it's
Yeah. So if kids aren't the hardest, like maybe maybe business,
doctors. No,
doctors.
doctors are worst. So the very worst I can imagine would be French doctors. So of all the countries
The
I've
bloody
worked,
French.
Britain aren't the easiest. Germans are pretty good. Israelis argue, but they're fine. The Slavs are fine once you get past the trust issues. Brits make a lot of jokes and they're hard to access, but you get it. Americans are easy to work with. Dutch are easy to work with. French are the hardest I've experienced to work with, just because of the culture and how they are. Maybe I got unlucky, but I was in a few corporations in France that were hard work. And in the UK, the hardest I've worked with doctors. Nurses
Really?
much easier.
I can imagine nurses,
Admin
because
much easier.
that knowing the nurse I work with, I actually think it's the sort of thing that would be like, just from the, you know, I'm going to use the word, haven't said it, but like the traumatic things that I've seen in accident and emergency.
They're open nurses as well. They're learners. They're open. Doctors kind of have to kind of present the illusion that they know everything. So it's difficult to learn when you know everything already, isn't it?
Yeah, that's very.
I mean, not all doctors. I've met some
Yeah,
great
yeah.
doctors, some really nice doctors, but you know, a few times I've worked with doctors and nurses and admins simultaneously, and I've very much seen who was the easier groups to work with. But that's just teachability, right? Like, I can't make someone coachable. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, these things we can do around that. We can point out the embodiment of openness, the embodiment of learning. We can talk about learning and what it means to learn. We can acknowledge expertise. I say, look, I'll never tell you how to be a doctor, and you might want to learn these skills which you didn't learn as a doctor. You know, how much soft skills training did you have as a doctor? 1 hour, 2 hours? Fuck all.
If you're lucky.
Right. How much stress management training do you have? And you're dealing with people who are dying every day. Do you know what I mean? You know, one of my friends is a palliative care doctor, and he's really, you know, his days are rough. Yeah. And it's like he was no training for that. You know, like soldiers I know got more training than him for dealing with loss. So it's you know, it's rough. And sometimes other groups surprise you. Like, I worked with some police once, and they were great. They were really easy to work. You know, I came in there as an ex-drug dealer thinking, okay, I'm a bit, you know, a bit cagey, you know, not sure how this is going to be. They were great, just practical, turned up on time, good guys. Yeah, it was no problem. So I mean, that's a nice thing about my job. I get to work with different groups.
Work with whole groups.
Like
you mentioned earlier about your dad being alcoholic, I think. It's one of the things that I find interesting about some of this work is like around addiction and maybe the I don't know, you've kind of, you know, the archetypes and the personality types of that, and how maybe embodiment and like awareness, I guess, of just these practices can maybe benefit those kind of things.
So how does embodiment help addiction?
Yeah.
You know, it's good ways to help addiction that are not so embody focused. You know, 12-step groups, for example, is something I'm part of, and, you know, I encourage if people, you know, can find that's a good fit for them. You know, Buddhism can be really helpful for a lot of people if they don't like 12-step or they want an adjunct. Just going to the gym can help. I mean, a lot of addictive people, essentially, we're self-medicating. So this is Gabor's word. We're self-medicating trauma, or just how we were born in some cases, I think, you know. So, you know, like I wake up with a charge every day. I go to the gym in the morning, get rid of that charge. I'm much more chill afterwards, or go, you know, walk in fields, or about to do a coaching call and I walk outside. It's just sort of get rid of that. You know, so learning self-regulation, being in co-regulatory environments, whether it be with a dog or a horse or a nice group of people, a yoga class where there's strict boundaries and structures and rules. You know, that's why people like yoga and martial arts. You have trauma. It's understandable. It's a controllable environment. It's actually a very predictable environment. So there's, you know, embodiment techniques can help with the self-regulation. They can help with the co-regulation. They can certainly be helpful. Like even just self-awareness. Like, you know, I do meditation and mindfulness every day, and today it's been quite a tough week, and I got to the end of the day, I was like, oh, I'm angry, oh, I'm stressed, I'm tense. And I realized I had this interview and I just went and sorted myself out beforehand because I was like, okay, I need to chill out, roll around on the floor. I was like, don't want to turn up to an interview like a head case. And by the time you saw me, right, I think I was in a pretty good mood.
Yeah, you're chilled. Yeah, so you were much more chilled than I was when I was
Yeah.
fighting
I
my
was like,
computer.
don't worry about it. It's all good. So, that self-awareness is really helpful because otherwise we, as someone who has addictive tendencies, we tend to act out.
Okay.
And, I'll notice, for example, I was in London last weekend. I noticed I started eating more sugar. It's like, oh, I'm self-medicating. I mean, it's not the worst. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not masturbating to dolphin porn while injecting myself with heroin. There's worse things you could be doing.
You say that like you've been there, Mark.
Yeah, it's a Tuesday. This was a say. No, but there's worse things. But I kind of noticed it. I noticed that tendency. I was like, okay, I'm a little bit disconnected, which is at the heart of addiction. And I'm a little bit anxious and stressed. I'm self-medicating with sugar. All right, when am I leaving London? All right, okay, there's worse things to do, but let's just tone this down until I leave,
Yeah, that's super cool. I like that. That's really interesting. Right, well, we've got just shy of 10 minutes really, but so it's kind of flown by. But what we'll before we kind of finish, one of the things you've kind of brought up in that addiction thing, and one of the things which maybe is something which resonated with me, which is some of your work, is around boundaries and whatever else. Because like as a this person who fucking finds it funny, but I'm also from my perspective, it's like I'm always trying to be nice and helpful and whatever else. And you posted something a while back and you were like self-care is more about boundaries than bubbles.
More about boundaries and bubble baths. Yeah.
And I read that and it was like, I thought it was I thought it was brilliant. Like, because I know that from my perspective, and my wife's the same. It's like, and maybe this is a cultural thing as well, and like just generally the state of life at the moment. But like, if you're an appeasable kind of guy, or
you'll get abused.
And it's kind of
terms. People will abuse you if you're nice, and if you're not nice, you'll abuse yourself. So they're the two basic personality types.
So you got to fit somewhere in the middle.
Yin and yang. Okay.
Yeah.
So you just have to. So like, if you're like me, you push yourself too hard, then you've got to be careful you don't abuse yourself. So I have to have boundaries about like when I finish work. I'll work till 9 o'clock tonight unless I kind of get my head around it.
Yeah.
Like I'm already tired. I'm like, no, it's time to clock off in 45 minutes. It's the end of my work. So yeah, there's people like me have to be careful we don't brutalize ourselves or our employees or anyone else we work with. Be nice to the wife. People like you have to be more careful with not letting others abuse them, having boundaries, saying no, or alternatively fuck off. And most of us have a bit of both, right?
Yeah.
It's not really so clear cut. There's times when I'm pushing myself too hard. There's times when I let people walk all over me and I have to say, this is not okay. Don't do that. And assert myself. And that's an embodied thing because you could read a book called How to Have Better Boundaries, right?
Yeah.
You still do it.
No, exactly.
You guys should do it. Now you just feel guilty about not doing it. And I could read a book called How to Be Soft and Let Go and how, how to chill out at the end of the work week, right? But
and still not do it.
It's that practice. You've got to practice through the body. So I give you an example. Like if you're doing, you do yoga, right? If you do a chaturanga, you can use that as a no. You can use that as a push away. Or if someone does bench pressing, same thing. They can use that as a no. Or we have a YouTube video of my beautiful wife demonstrating no pose, which is one of our poses on YouTube. No into no pose, Mark Walsh into YouTube will come up with that. It's sort of easier to show than to tell. So that would be helpful. And another tool I could teach if you wanted would just be centering. Like that would be helpful. Both cases, actually.
Well, I think, I mean, as we kind of coming up to the very end, I think if you're, as always, I say it every episode, but, I gave up nursing, even though I'm doing more nursing now, to try to help people not necessarily have to go and use accident emergency. So, something that people can do to move, breathe, live a happier, healthier life.
Yeah, no, great. I love that you have practical tools. Talk won't get it. It's like listen to a lot of podcasts. It's like saying I've read a lot of books on kissing. It's not really very impressive. It's like it's just information. So start, but practices are great. So this is centering. This is great for optimizing your state, reducing your stress, putting yourself in a more relaxed state so you can say no or you can say yes, whatever you want to do, more choiceful. One of the top things I teach coaches, yoga teachers, business people, it's a super quick win, And the reason we need something quick is because life's fast. You haven't. I love yoga and breath work, but I haven't always got an hour to go do them. I haven't. I had 10 minutes earlier before this call. I don't even have 10 minutes sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's fast. So centering can be as simple as ABC. We have a technique called ABC if people want to try it. Eyes open, particularly if you're driving while listening to this. You can listen to that.
Just get that on clear. Make sure you've got your eyes open if you're driving.
Yeah, try that. I mean, you don't have to close your eyes to do this, which is part of the beauty of it. You can do it in a meeting or driving. So A is awareness. Feel your body. Listen all around you. So we're bringing ourselves present, mindfulness, awareness. B is balance, finding a bit more balance in your seat, or if you're standing, you're standing. C is core relaxation. So relaxing the eyes, the mouth, the belly. You can say, ah. And think of someone who makes you smile. The last C is connected, just for a second, cheeky extra C. Makes you smile. That's 30 seconds. And I felt pretty good before, but I actually feel a little bit better now. How do you feel?
Yeah, totally. When you said like the core relaxation, because I felt like, I was sitting there, when you said relax your core, essentially, it was like, oh yeah, oh God, actually, yeah. And it's amazing. It's crazy how much you can, how much, just sitting, you just felt like it let go. Yeah.
Simple, super simple. You can do that computer, you can do that driving, you can do that horseback, anything, right? Like walking down the street, slightly different walking, but not so different. And if people want to look it up, they can look up ABC centering. They can see a younger, skinnier version of me teaching it on the internet from many years ago.
I'll find it and I'll stick it in the show notes so people can
Mark from 19 wherever it was. And we've been doing this a while, but loads of resources online as well. We've got is it all right if I plug a couple of resources before
plug everything, mate? I was going to say, where can people find you? What do you want to tell people about?
Best place to find me is embodimentunlimited.com, because we've got loads of free stuff there. We've got free stuff for yoga teachers, free stuff if you're interested in trauma and meditation, all the things we talked about, free top tips for coaches. There's ebooks. We've got an app if people want to do it on their phone. Just look for Embodiment Unlimited app. And again, there's loads of free resources there, including interviews with Mate, all different teachers, that some of which we talked about. So embodimentunlimited.com, either the website or the app, is the best way. If you like little videos like you've been talking about, you could follow me on Facebook or Instagram. It's Mark Walsh, WALSH. Find me on all the normal platforms and Amazon for my books, and Grinder in Brighton, no doubt, too. Don't tell my wife.
I'll make sure that the Grinder is top and
make sure that's there. If first, we're that lucky.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure. I know you've got to obviously go and work yourself into the ground a little bit more, and I've got to
half an hour left, and I'm done, mate. It's chill after that.
I've got to go and pack my bag to fly to America tomorrow. So I'm going to
go somewhere nice.
Lake Tahoe. I'm going to go snowboarding. So
nice. Yeah, enjoy.
Yeah, it's good. Go and pluck myself off some jumps and cliffs and shit. I hope so. We'll see.
Don't break yourself. All right.
I'll try not to. Well, again, thanks so much, buddy. It's been an absolute pleasure, and hopefully, my sister-in-law lives down in Worthing, so maybe next time I'm down there or something. If you're around, are you still in Brighton, or are you somewhere else?
I'm in the west of England now, actually.
Oh yeah.
You ping me where you are on Instagram, so I can say hi if we're in the same area.
That'd be amazing. All right, fella. Well, look after yourself, and again, it's been a pleasure.
Cheers. No, it's good. Good interview. Enjoyed it. Thank you. Bye bye.
No, peace.